Bahia de Caráquez in Quito, Ecuador. And before telling you more about what we did this summer, I wanted to make a note about what inspired me and my friends to do this project. And I arrived at this book, Nourishment Traditions, after many years of searching and experimenting with healthy dietary regimes like vegetarianism and veganism and macrobiotic diets. And I finally got to this book, which made a lot of sense to me because it's about finding value in traditional ways of cooking and eating. And what is most interesting is that it's validated with scientific research and current findings done through scientific studies. And the most interesting part of my findings in this book was this recipe titled Ecuadorian quinoa casserole. And I'm from Ecuador, so it was very interesting to see the recipe that my grandmother and my mother used to make. And with a very interesting note of a claim of authenticity of this in this recipe. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph. This authentic recipe from a cheaper centenarian living in Ecuador, and Ecuador is not written correctly. It has a Q instead of a C, which contradicts the whole. Incorporates all the basic principles for easy digestion and thorough assimilation. Use of rich stock made by boiling bones for a long time, pre-soaking of grain, and the addition of cultured cream and homemade cheese, rich in fat-soluble vitamins. So I found myself reading this book and this recipe, and I thought it was ridiculous to have to be reading this in a book after many years of living here in the U.S. and it's 7 years that I've been studying here, and this is a knowledge that is in my family. So I decided to, organize this project with other friends that have the same interests. So, what stuck me was that I got to this book after many years of studying, and after almost I'm about to get my PhD, and the audience of this book are middle and upper class educated people, while younger generations, including myself in Ecuador, never interested ourselves in learning, right? I mean, I don't really know how to cook this properly, right? Even though I saw my mom make it, and many of these recommendations resonated a lot with what she did, but I never interested myself. So, the other interesting thing is, that they're really emphasizing not on the products themselves, but on the formulas, right? What are the correct formulas, the principles of cooking that are contained in these old and traditional or ancestral recipes that have healing potential. So this is what they're selling basically in this book, right? So not only how to eat quinoa or eating quinoa, but how to eat it properly, or how to cook it properly. So this is the team of several people that traveled to Ecuador this summer. Two of us are from Ecuador, myself and Alejandra, which is on the far right, bottom row, and Rocio del Águila, who is the one with the glasses. And we're both, two of them are PhD, they already got their PhD from Texas. And the other people are students from the organization that my friend Alejandra runs, which is called La Poderosa Media Project, which is an organization that she created to bring workshops for younger people in several Latin American countries. And so they are, the two guys on the top right are students have been students in these workshops that she's brought for the past 4 years. And so they're collaborating in this research, and they're both from Manabi. So they're also acquainted with food traditions, and they were assisting. And the other people are just volunteers that came to work with the film project this summer. And also Josh, who is on the back, and he's a freelance photographer and musician, and also specializes in organic farming and eco-agriculture. And my husband, who also helped out in the second trip we made to Bahia. So we wanted, this is Chio, and she's also a professional chef. So she helped out doing the arrangements for the photos that we were taking. And yeah, here's Ali with one of our students, and we're doing the recording. So we also wanted this to be a personal project. So we went to Alejandra's grandmother in Bahia, she's originally from Chone, which is a province. I don't know if you can see on the 2 yellow spots that I highlighted there. So Chone is a city nearby Bahia, and that's where my friend is from. And her, all of her part of her family now lives in Bahia. And I am from Quito, but my family is originally from Ambato, which is a city close to, in the highlands of Ecuador. So we are capturing two different regional cooking traditions and eating traditions, as well as making it a personal project about our grandmothers and our family traditions, right? So this is Alice's grandmother and aunt, and that's my aunt and my grandmother. We got some funding from the Consejo Nacional de Cinematografía in Ecuador because we wanted, our proposal was to make a documentary on this. So we, for this specific grant, we are going to make a short documentary, and in the medium and long run, we plan to make a recipe book and also community interventions with the younger and older generations in these places where we're doing our research. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our framework. We work on the methodology, so we work with older women of ages between 60 and 90 years old, and they're mid-age to older age women. So when we are talking to them, we are capturing long period of time, and in that sense, we really want to define what we mean by traditional, and what we are trying to look or to find traditional ways of cooking. We need to define what is traditional. So because it's such a long lifespan, and there were many transformations, important transformations happening along or throughout that lifespan. So one of the most important, I think, that we're taking into account is there's a point of rupture, and there's some major changes happening in the starting in the 70s and 80s, specifically what is known as the nutrition transition that is affecting Ecuador as well as Latin America, which is going along with demographic changes and epidemiological changes. Can anyone? Yes, everyone here? Yeah. Which, there's been some major changes in terms of increased aging and rapid aging of the population, decreased mortality. So people now are living longer lives, but with higher diet-related diseases. Lower quality of life because of the way we eat, as opposed to 50 or 60 years ago, where people were getting sick not because, or not necessarily, or not as much because of how they were eating, right? So there's been an increase in sugar consumption, fats, specifically vegetable oils, and refined carbohydrates, and a lot of lifestyle changes that have to do with the processes of urbanization. The majority of the population now, as opposed to 30 or 40 years ago, lives in cities, and there's a related process of internal migration that is reflected in our interviews. So my grandmother was born in Ceballos, which is a rural town in Tungurahua, in the province of Tungurahua, and it's not the capital of the province. So they migrated, my family migrated from Ceballos to Ambato, which is the capital of this province, which is not, at that time it was primarily rural, and then they did another step to migrate to the capital of the country, which is Quito, which is where they now live. And some of them have traveled and lived in other countries as well. So they have gathered some of these. I mean, they have all of this baggage that is a product of all of the places where they lived and all of their migration history, right? And so when we are talking to them, we are inquiring about their memories of their childhood, right? So that is capturing implicitly the differences between a rural and urban lifestyle, and the ways that they used to eat in those places. And many of these women, of the women in the coast as well, they used to live in what is called el campo, the countryside or rural areas where they're mostly living on subsistence agriculture and not too much on industrialized foods that came a little later, right? So there's that other dichotomy between the local and the global and the home and the industrial. So the industrialized or the growth of the industrial food or the food industry, and specifically animal industry in the 70s and 80s, really affected the way people ate. People now eat a lot more meat than they were eating before. There's replaced animal fats for vegetable fats, and increased the amount of sugar and sweets that they eat, and especially refined carbohydrates and sugar. And so they all go together with this dichotomy between the traditional and the modern. So we are doing this relationship, we're making this relationship between the traditional and a before moment, which I also want to point out that we want to acknowledge that this before is not a static or homogeneous, right? So that is what I want to talk about in discussing some of the ways that we are defining traditional. So traditional could be defined as a habitual ways of doing or customary, right? But if we take into account 30 years ago, people started using vegetable oils, and now vegetable oil is part of the traditional dishes, right? As opposed to 50 or 60 years ago when it was lard and pork fat, right? So it's not a good definition in that sense of habitual, because eating sweets or candy can also be habitual, right? So there's the difference between how we define traditional cooking today versus traditional cooking before. This point of rupture that we are establishing, and especially also because, and importantly because, some of these products have longer histories, right? So, for example, yuca or cassave has a pre-Hispanic history, right? It was consumed by the Incas, and plantain is also a traditional or a key ingredient and a staple in the coastal diets, but it was introduced by the colonization, during colonization. So, and vegetable oils or industrialized products, they have a more recent history, and so the memories are also shorter, right? In this collective kind of memory that we are we are exploring. And also we think we make a distinction between traditional and ancestral because of what I just mentioned. There are some elements in traditional diet that were not always there. And this is the case of sugar, fat, and milk, and beef, chicken, pork, which were introduced by the Spanish, right? So these would be considered ancestral, but not, for example, if we take cazuela, which is my first photograph, well, yeah, or many of the dishes in Bahia contain plantain. So plantain, according to this definition, would not be ancestral because it doesn't include it doesn't take into account this other history, right? And so we're trying to understand our concept of traditional food as traditional food knowledge systems, or which are complex systems of local knowledge and practice that have meanings to members of a local group and that have developed over generations and transformed over generations, and which have added elements along the way which people have appropriated and legitimized as traditional, right? And as part of their identities, of their local and social and cultural identities. So, in terms of our methodology, we were doing interviews, open and semi-structured interviews, and also participant observation, bearing into account these two moments of before and after, right? So our questions focus on family, ethnic, socioeconomic background, and the experience, the cooking experience, and how each of these women, we also interviewed men, but mostly women, how they acquired this cooking experience. So when we are doing these questions, a lot of the class disparities or class differences emerged. And one of those was significantly lower class women are specialists. They are the ones that are the most experts because and in most cases they are, in the case of the women that we spoke to, they're making a living out of cooking, right? They have their businesses, and that is the way they make a living. So in a lot of their histories, there is the fact that there used to be servants, right? Domestic servants, or the servants of the house of the big hacendados and hacendadas, right? And so the upper class women, in the case of, for example, Alejandra's grandmother, she told us that she didn't learn how to cook in childhood, as opposed to other lower class women who came from the countryside, because her dad didn't allow her in the kitchen. And so the servants, and generally women, are the ones that are cooking, right? But nonetheless, she has a lot of knowledge, cooking knowledge, because along her life, this is what is expected from her, that she knows how to cook and that she directs her servants, her aides in cooking, right? So there are also women that have had more access to education, and therefore they are able to communicate better, as opposed to the lower class women. That is something that really stood out in our work, is the ways, such difficult ways, or this process of just getting this information from, especially the lower class women, and the ones that are the specialists, right? Because they don't have the communication skills as educated women do, right? And the same goes for men. And men are even better informants than women, than educated women. And this was really outstanding, the way that men could just narrate in an orderly and structured manner what were the typical dishes, at what times of day they were eaten, and what were the ingredients that were incorporated, and yet they are not the main cooks, right? Although in Manabi we learned that there's an interesting gender dynamics different from maybe other parts in the highlands, which is that men and women are taught to do household duties, including cooking, in childhood. So both men and women learn to cook and learn to do household duties. But when they get married, then they are, the women are expected to cook for them. So they're generally. So I brought this sample of recipe, which is from my aunt, and just to as an example of how difficult it can be to create a recipe for people that are not part of the cultural group to understand, right? So the way that these women tell their recipes is just like my aunt did in that narrative. There's no quantities, there's no specification for ingredients, and that's just the way they're able to communicate. So that the labor of researching this is you really have to dig deep, right? What are the amounts? And even if they tell you what are the amounts, it will never be in the way that they do it. So when we were recording their cooking, there's so many little steps that they would never tell you. They don't tell you, and that they're so important. For example, using lime to spread over the plantains. When they peel the plantains, they spread lemon all over them so the plantains won't get black. And this is something that if you sit with her, she will never tell you that. So you have to see and be there. Because and for me this, it's like, they do a lot of, the cooking is entails a lot of creativity and improvisation. So many of these things, they're not necessarily going to communicate to you, so you really have to be there to learn, right? And the other interesting thing in relation to gender was a lot of the recurrent comments from people that we talked to about the older ways of eating and the older or the traditional, the ways of the past of eating and of cooking, was that they're really yearning for the taste, right? The taste is so different because the utensils are different and the products are not the same. And one of the reasons is because women are lazy. And women are not, they're not grinding the spices like they did before. So they are not freshly ground spices, and therefore the taste changes. Women are not cooking as they did before, as it was done before, 3 times a day, or even more, because in some upper class families, they're even 5 meals a day, and women are all day long in the kitchen. So, of course, there's other reasons why women are not in the kitchen all day long, and it's not because they're lazy, it's because they're working, right? The gender dynamics have changed over the past 30 or 40 years, and women are more in the workplace now, women are more in school now, and so they don't have time. So they seek out to these instant industrialized aids, right, for women. And so there's this related research that has been done about that relates to these, which is the frequency of family meals in relation to weight and obesity, and how this is not specific to Ecuador or to Latin America, but is some of the recent research that has been done. So the more frequent children and adolescents have in family, there's a less risk for obesity and overweight. And so my future line of inquiry for me is whether, what are the gender implications of these kind of research, right? And of these findings. And I just also wanted to note how rewarding was this experience for me as an anthropologist. There's very little opportunities I've had in doing my research where I've been able to give back and feel that I'm also giving back to the community and to the people that I'm working with. And it's really incredible how these women really felt empowered, and the way that we could open up a space to increase the social representation, especially through audiovisuals, video, and photographs. It's really powerful, and so they felt that they were gaining a lot from our intervention. So I thought that was really interesting really valuable for me at least. And so these are some of the women we work with, and we also gave in this first stage we selected some photographs and we gave it to them, and we also sent a letter of thanking them, right, for participating. But of course the documentary is coming up, so there's going to be a showing, and they're going to be invited, and they're just really happy. And it's really a way in which the younger people, these are older women, so these are one of the more marginalized groups in the society. So coming, a group of people, and I'm also a little bit foreign as well because I'm coming from a U.S. university, and I'm coming with a group of also, there's foreign researchers. They also feel, their knowledge is recognized, and that there's an outcome, related outcome that their families and their communities are recognizing their work because of that, and because we're also, hopefully going to introduce this scientific validation of their knowledge, and so that is also something that will benefit them, I think. This is the cazuela de mariscos, and it's one of the typical, not traditional, but also traditional, but it's typical because it's symbolic of the food from Manabí and from the coast of Ecuador. So this is one of the things that came up a lot in the interviews, like I said, the pots that are used. So I brought cazuela, a clay pot, and this is one thing that a lot of them emphasize, how cooking in these pots conveys the flavor to the food, and this is completely lost, and they're very, very sad about it, and they're yearning, this taste. So we explored a little more about, who are making these and who is consuming, whether it's still used, right? And a lot of these people, this Lolita, who made this La Cazuela, she had a lot of these in her house, but they're stored, and she never used them anymore. But she has a lot of these utensils. This spoon made from mate, from a tree, and cazuela, which is from the earth, right? And she has a lot of them at home, but she doesn't use them. So we went to the small town nearby, like 2 hours away, where a group of women make a living out of these clay, making clay pots and selling them. And the most frequent visitors to their house are foreigners and tourists, not so much local people. But when we were doing, when we were doing our, the interview, a man came, and I'm not sure if he was buying or he was just asking them for some of the earth right, of the clay that they had collected in these big pots, and it's not any clay or any earth. They have to dig 4 meters down, and that's the clay that they're using. And this man was bringing, and I asked him what is he using it for, and he said he's bringing it for a person that is recovering from cancer or for chemotherapy, that she's uses them for clay packs. So that is also brought up a lot of, in my own family, the clay packs are some traditional remedy, right, that is used to lower fever, and well, you can look online, it's all over the place, the benefits of clay packs, right, especially in the abdomen. So, and so this is oven, right, the traditional oven that we learned from a specialist in the history of food in Ecuador, and he explained to us that this is pre-Hispanic, one of the few pre-Hispanic technologies, right? No, I think it's the battery. I forgot to plug it. Sorry.
Right here in F5, right 4, whatever is on the top. Yeah.
It's resume. No, it was a computer.
Yeah, but I wanted to show you all. And this is the way it works. So they heat up the charcoal, or in previous times, the wood fire. Is that how you call it? Like that. Now they're using charcoal, but they heat it up in the inside of this huge cazuela, and when it's warm enough, they have this cover. I think it's aluminum, or and they put it on top of it, and then they put whatever they want to bake inside, and they cover it. Right? So that's the traditional or ancestral oven, actually. And so here is another. We did several recipes with this one. This one is torta de verde, which is a plantain cake with pork skin. And this is tortillas de yuca tortillas with cheese. And so one day we went to this, this is one of the women that we were working with, and she has a restaurant, and it's one of the most acclaimed restaurants in Bahia, because she used to cook for Sixto Durán Ballén, which is the ex-president of Ecuador. He has a house in Bahia. So, she's very well known. And she was making, when we came to interview her, she was, just by chance, she was doing these tortillas, and these are corn tortillas. So we asked her how she made them. if she had the oven or what oven, and we discovered the way that she adapted this pre-Hispanic oven, the concept, to her industrial kitchen. So I brought a short video to show you. And I'm just gonna pause it. So yeah, that is the way that they adapted, right? And those are the tortillas. And the other, so I'm just gonna talk about a few of the highlights that we found. We were trying to inquire about the relationship, a specific relationship between healing and food, right? So a lot of these, the foods that people mentioned are pregnant women and women that just gave birth. So chocolate was one of the foods that came up. Women that have given birth are given chocolate. It's good for them. So we found, a guy that he has this small enterprise, and he goes around selling raw chocolate bars. And you can pass it out if you want. And we contacted him, and he, recreated the whole process that he does in his farm to make this chocolate. We got to know the cacao fruit, which is delicious, the seeds, and then they dry up the seeds, they ferment, toast them, peel them, and then grind it and make the paste. And the other important food, very important food, healing food, is caldo de gallina criolla. This is a free-range chicken soup, and it's part of the tradition, the contemporary tradition in Bahia to make this soup every Sunday. People make it at home, but there's few women that cook caldo de gallina criolla and sell it on the street every day, 4 p.m. onwards. So we went and explored further about the chickens themselves and how to tell them apart, because they're different kinds. These are not any kind of chicken. They're criollas, the native, right? That would be the translation, but they're actually chickens that I still have to do some more research, but I think that they have not been modified, right, genetically by the food and animal industry as other kinds of chickens that are specifically ponedoras. They put eggs, a lot of eggs every day, and there are other chickens that they're just bigger because they're given hormones, and they're just different species of chickens. So it's a It was easier for us to discover how to learn how to tell them apart by the form of the feet or the feet. They're skinnier, and also the pico. ¿Cómo se dice? Peak. Yeah, it's a round peak for the other chickens, and for the criollas is a more pointed, right? And people are very selective in Bahia about their caldo de gallina de criolla, and they really know how to tell whether it's criolla or not, right? And they like the criolla and they value it, and the criollas are sold at higher prices. They are between $15 to $18 each, as opposed to the other chickens, which are about $12. The other interesting aspect was shrimp, right? I mean, all kinds of animals, but shrimp was one very interesting to really learn how to tell them apart and to investigate how people were valuing it differently, right? So in the end, I concluded that older people care more about where their shrimp comes from, because they know how it tasted. They can tell the difference between the sea shrimp and the farm shrimp, right? So we also interviewed some, and this is a photo of we went to the market and we asked for the different kinds of shrimp, the camarón de piscina, the farm shrimp, and the sea shrimp. And they're virtually impossible to distinguish, for me at least, because there are many different kinds of shrimp, and you can find the sea shrimp, which is also larger, which is called langostino, that is a bigger. But also los camarones de piscina, the farm shrimp, they're given hormones and preservatives, right? Because Ecuador exports shrimp, so they send it to the city and they export it here and to Europe. So there are some people saying that some people value or they like the camarón de piscina because it's bigger. But of course they don't know about the hormones and the preservatives and all that they use to grow them. And also, there's a whole struggle between the local fishermen and los camaroneros, the bigger shrimpers, yeah, that have the farms, the shrimp farms, which are also destroying the mangrove, right? And there's a big struggle of the fishermen, the local fishermen who live on the, catching the clams and shrimps, and destroying the mangrove and the ecosystem where they live, and so these are the mangroves. And also, this is photos from the nearby islands, which is Isla Corazon. And the people there, and with the support of the government, have been reforesting the island, and a lot of bird species have returned and have migrated from all over, but especially from Galapagos, and they have populated. And one of them is fragatas, right, the frigates. And the other highlight from our research was the piñón, el árbol de piñón, which is a tree that grows in a dry forest that is Bahia, right? And so I found this on the market, on the local market, and I found out it's a soap, and it's jabón prieto, black soap. So you can take a look if you want, but it has a very strong smell, and they make it from the seeds of this tree. And people in the countryside especially, and yes, particularly people that came from the countryside, and also lower class people in the cities that originated in the countryside, which are also called montubios, this ethnic category that is just been incorporated in the census. They're using this soap especially to wash their hair, because they say the other shampoos and soaps give them what is it? Caspa?
Then.
Yeah, dander. So we gathered several really interesting testimonies of cancer curing, right? And this was one of them. A woman that we spoke to told us a remedy she used, a local remedy for her eye. She had a tumor in her eye, and she was taking the sap of this tree with honey, and her tumor disappeared. And this is just one of the several testimonies we gathered of women that were cured by looking local ingredients and with local remedies, right? So in my family, highlight was the zanahoria amarilla, or zanahoria blanca. Amarilla is called the carrot that everyone knows, the orange one. But this is a kind of carrot that is found in the highlands. And according to my mom, my grandmother, and the tradition, this is one of the foods that is given to the women that have just given birth. And they have to eat it. Like caldo de gallina, for at least 8 days, eating gallina criolla and caldo de gallina, and also zanahoria blanca. Zanahoria blanca. So, and we also made rompope. Don't know how to translate that, but it's like
Eggnog.
yeah, but it's not a drink. It's mhm. I don't know. And yeah, you just
Eggnog pudding. Eggnog pudding.
yeah, and so it's just like raw eggs with some wine or other kind of liquor and sugar. And this is also my grandmother, just forced me to eat it because it says it's good for fertility. The raw eggs, right? And this is also there's also a lot of research done about this, especially the yolk. And the other interesting was lard, right? I mean, this is a pork skin that is still sold at the markets, but people have stopped using lard since 20 or 30 years ago, when the big vegetable oil industries and the recommendations as is supposedly better for health than this, right? But it's contradictory because of all the testimonies and the statistics about people not suffering from cardiovascular diseases 50 or 60 or 70 years ago when they were using lard and butter, right? As opposed to now. And there's also research done about that. So we rendered our lard, which is another recipe included in the book I showed you, how to render lard. This is another some interesting finding. So the way that people or the industry marketed the community of people that were consuming lard is by they introduced this manteca vegetal tres coronas or tres chanchitos, which is a palm oil, and they have to add flavoring, pork flavoring. Otherwise, people and yet people keep yearning for and even they're complaining about the porks, today's porks, and the lard from today's porks is not the same taste as the lard from antes. And it's interesting how the whole iconography that this industry uses, the smiling animals, and also the pastoral kind of iconography, and sabor a campo, right? That's the slogan for this caldo de gallina, what do you call it?
Chicken stock.
The chicken, yeah.
Chicken stock.
With with the flavoring of the countryside, or the flavor of the countryside, and that's the way they try to sell or market that. The other interesting aspect is butter, right? So Bonella, the one that is the most popular butter, but of course it's not butter, it's margarine. It's made from hydrogenated oils, but yet people continue to call it butter and believe it is butter. They don't know it's a different kind of oil and fat. And they disregard butter from grass-fed milk cows that is available in all markets, and that actually, yeah, it's grass-fed, because even though the livestock in Ecuador, the industry they use a lot of vaccines and medicines for cows. The cows are still eating grass, as opposed to here in the U.S. Right? It's a different quality of the milk and of the butter that you get. So, and that's they still distribute it to homes, the raw milk that you can't find this in the city. In Quito, this is completely or almost completely lost. And some final comments. So my interest in part of the reason why I gave you that recipe is one of the few recipes you could still make here, because you can find the ingredients. But the interesting thing about that recipe is specifically what we're trying to look for is the nutritional value in traditional ways of cooking and eating. And that recipe combines liver with lime. And just because of my own experience with a period of time that I was sick with anemia, I learned that iron has to be combined with vitamin C in order to be assimilated. And this is just one example of the ways that it goes together, right? Traditionally, in these traditional ways. And also plantains, right? Plantains have a high iron content, and a lot of the dishes in Manabí and in the coast combine plantain with lime. And prohibit other combinations. For example, milk with garlic, or the plantain also goes well with peanuts, but there are certain combinations that are not allowed, right? And this is something that we really have to dig deep into, really knowing which. So peanuts with milk, or pork, or corn, they shouldn't go together, because they don't. So these are some of the questions that we have for future research, and that's it.
So we still have time if you have questions or comments.
That was amazing, by the way. I have a question about the last thing that you were talking about combinations that were prohibited and not prohibited. Was there a huge difference between those combinations in Manabí versus in the Sierra? For example, like my host family gave me garlic milk all the time in the Sierra, but I found that interesting that was prohibited in Manabí.
It was so interesting to me because I came to the U.S. and I became lactose intolerant. I cannot eat any milk or cheese because and so I was eating at the house. We were staying there for like 3 weeks, and the cook of the house, she cooked every day with milk, the soup with milk. And so I said, well, I need to give up, even if I feel horrible. So I decided, okay, I'm just gonna eat anything that I eat. And after a few days, I realized I was not feeling any discomfort. And then that is when I started, investigating what is she doing that, I'm eating this milk and it's raw and it's not doing But I still need to do a little more research of, in Quito, because I think Quito has a lot of influences, a lot more influence, I think, and also, and in my family, there's a lot of dishes that combine garlic and milk.
Okay.
And so I don't know, and yeah, it's also interesting to know the ways that the coast and the Sierra and the highlands, they have a lot of connection, but there's a lot of disconnect with the Oriente, with the Amazon, right? And so a lot of the foods. So for example, this is a bolas de verde, sopa de bolas de verde, which is a plantain ball soup that is traditional from my family. I asked my grandmother to do this for me, and it's the plantains, of course, are not local from the highlands. They're from the coast. So yeah, it would be interesting to know. And I think in Manabí we found some of the ingredients from the highlands, but not to the extent as they are in Quito and in the highlands. So that is an interesting point that we need to explore more. Yeah.
Did you have just kind of like the firsthand, like the story that people were telling you, like I used the honey and I don't have cancer anymore, or I don't have the tumor anymore? Was it just directly from the person that you talked, or did they go see a doctor and they had confirmed?
Well, yes, I have a story, but I didn't wanna. Lolita, who I showed you, she made the cazuela. She told this story on camera. I didn't ask her, but she told me. And then she told it, that her testimony. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and it was terminal. 3 months the doctor gave her for her kidney cancer, and it's a really powerful and touching story. But she decided not to go for the chemotherapy treatment, and she went her own way in spite of her whole family was against her, and she took aloe with honey and whiskey every morning, and the whole community knows her because she's well known because she does sweets, a lot of sweets, right? She has that business or small business, and she's very well known that she was diagnosed with cancer, and everyone knows that she was about to. And she is 7 years. So I want to go back and talk to the doctor and ask him, why didn't he follow up? The Lolita is the living testimony that the doctor's word is wrong, right? And there should be some kind of responsibility for that, right? And they should be following up. And if these remedies are working, I think that there should be some research, right? So there's several people. Of course, that was not the focus. It was just a map over the course of the research. So that's something that we want to explore further. She's 70 years old. Yeah, that's her. And she works all day long. It's incredible. Yes.
During your trips, did you notice that the children in the house, when you see the children and you see the woman, did you notice that the woman were overweight and the children were thin?
Yeah, that's interesting. We spoke to a nutritionist in Bahia, and there's a problem with increased rates of overweight and obesity among children. And there's even a program by the Ministry of Health to control the foods that are sold at the bars in schools because of this problem. So in terms of statistics, the little research I have done so far, is that, in Ecuador there is this transition, there's a drastic transition from a problem of chronic undernutrition to overweight. That is what is happening in other countries as well. So this is especially affecting children and women, like you said. And in 2004, adult women, 40% of mothers were overweight. And there's a problem of the combination of stunting and overweight. So stunting is low height, which is an indicator of chronic undernutrition, and in combination with and there's a significant, small but significant percentage of women and mothers in Ecuador who are overweight and stunted. And that is a predictor for chronic undernutrition in children. So yeah, and the obesity and overweight rates are much higher for women than are for men. And this is a regional trend.
Do you see it in the rural areas though?
Yes, a lot of these women, many of them, the ones that we spoke to, they're overweight. They're overweight, especially in the city, and in this transition, and especially the ones who were born in the city. A lot of them suffer diabetes, and they're specialists in the traditional foods, but they're using all these other ingredients. They're using a lot of vegetable oils and margarine and a lot of sugar, processed foods. So it's interesting to see the ways that the traditional diet has transformed. So it still has traditional elements. For example, the traditional before the traditional breakfast was baked plantain on the oven or on the grill. Yeah, it's not fried. But today, children are given fried plantain in the morning. And
One thing,
Yes.
I understand you are like trying to recuperate all of this, but not necessarily traditional food is healthy. I mean, one thing that I didn't notice in any of your diet is fresh vegetables.
no, but that's also very important.
I mean, you have plantain is carbohydrate.
Yeah, okay.
You have lard, you have meat, quinoa. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
everything is also very heavy,
Yeah.
and there is no fresh vegetables there.
No, yeah, but who told you that fresh vegetables is the way that they're used to eat for?
No, that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is like traditional food is not necessarily.
But
It's
that's-
not necessarily not heavy. I mean, plantains for breakfast, either fried or baked, is is not like an apple.
Activity has changed.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
An activity, and also, I mean, this is also something that I want to really look into is we are made to eat certain foods, right? And these people in the coast, as far as I could, 100 years, let's say 100 years, they're not made to eat fresh vegetables.
In the
They
coast.
never ate fresh vegetable except for tomato and cucumber. All of the rest of vegetables are cooked.
Yeah, this is what. Yeah.
So why?
You
I
have
mean,
you have to qualify that statement because the coast is very long. You
yes,
go to the north.
yeah, exactly.
You have to go to the south, to the lower, you have to go to the coast in Guayas, go to north in Esmeraldas, even the southern coast to Peru. They
Mhm.
do eat fresh vegetables, they do mix them with lime, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So you have to qualify the statement because it's not really true. Because I'm from Ecuador, so I know this.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Manabi, right?
Yes, and it's still, I know people from Manabi, so I know they eat fresh vegetables in Manabi. It's just the people that you're looking at, people that have migrated from the north,
Mhm.
from the highlands to Manabi, probably have a different type of culture, or they have mixed cultures in the way they're consuming these
Mhm.
products. So I think, you're right, there's traditional foods that are great, but not all traditional, as Angelina is saying, is good. Even the traditional way to cooking, that oven that you were showing is not efficient. It's actually produced a lot of gas that actually can kill this person and have lung disease. because of the emissions. So that's traditional or ancestral, but I don't think it's effective, efficient, or good for the health of the people that are cooking in the kitchen. So, I mean, traditional is great. It's good for many things, food related, engineering related, sometimes like Incas and Mayas, the way they build things and the agriculture. But there's some, and sometimes I don't think that's all the time is true. So, but it's great.
Yeah, I mean, like Nicoleta said, I mean, there is no way that we can just be fundamentalists about, traditional, and because we do not live in that time. We live in a different moment where physical activity is much lower, and there's many other factors, contamination and other, exposure to other risk factors that are, they cannot be solved by just eating a traditional diet. But what I'm saying is that there's some value in the traditional ways of cooking that we can learn from, and that can be useful to face up to these challenges, right?
There's long-term consuming, no? So also, I mean, I'm thinking that must be also a lot of heavy stuff if you want to put that in practice every day, is consuming,
And there's a lot of differences also between the upper and lower classes, right? I mean, the lower classes that campesinos are working in the fields, right? And they're using up a lot of energy, so they need energy-rich foods. So if you maintain that diet in the current lifestyle, it would not be good, right? I mean, it would be counterproductive. Yes, Dan?
I wanted to get back to this point that, the little comment that the problem is that the women today are lazy and they're not grinding their own spices. And I mean, how do you deal with the fact that a lot of this is incredibly labor intensive,
Right.
and very often the role of women, like, I mean, even when we don't necessarily fetishize the past and assume everything's good, we want to recuperate this knowledge, but not go back to where you have to spend 7 hours
Exactly.
grinding your own cornmeal or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that is also, I mean, really, really important. I mean, the difference that blender made for a woman that had to spend hours just grinding by hand, right? I mean, you don't want to go back to that past. I mean, you wanna also acknowledge the value of these, these technological additions to traditional ways of cooking. Yes.
I was wondering if you looked into when and how rice got introduced and became such a huge part of Ecuadorian food.
I think early 20th century.
Yeah.
And that was also something that we inquired about, and how, especially Alice's mother, she was very, very, about rice, and how that is so important for Manavitas and the diet for Manavi, because there was no food without rice. And I asked her about whether it was always the white rice, because that is some very controversial in there's all this vegetarian and that you have to eat whole rice, but these people never ate whole rice, or they never. It was always, and it was there was a whole process. It was not industrial. They stepped on the rice to take off the peel, right? And it was always the white rice, but it's recent, so it's early 20th century that it was introduced. So again, it's not ancestral.
Because that would throw off the carbohydrate count quite a bit
Probably.
too.
Yes, because the plantain with the rice. And there's always plantain and rice. So.
Of course, have to have the potato.
Potato and rice.
Yeah, potato
Urea
and rice.
Pasta, right?
Okay, that's
Delicious.
Any other questions or comments? So we can go ahead lunch?
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bueno, eres tú.
Yes, of course.
Me encanta.